Hello and welcome back to the Sell Like You podcast with me, Harriet Miller. And today we are joined by John Hall, creator and founder of the Maintain app. Now, John, I was blown away by your launch party, which was only a few weeks ago now, and the network that you have built in such a short period of time. But before we dive into that, welcome. Tell us a little bit about the Maintain app, and we'll get right into it.
Well, thank you for having me on, Harriet. It's great. I remember meeting you a few months ago, and it was quite quickly on my sort of target list to come onto your podcast. So I thought that's a nice tick for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think probably I've not been in Perth for very long, so I figured that the best way of doing it is try and make as much impact as possible as quickly as possible, really. So yeah, that certainly the launch party was pretty much the biggest, bigger than I was imagining, to be honest. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah, and you definitely tick that box of creating an impact. You certainly did that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. So tell us, what is the Maintain app? What got you there? What is it? Who does it help?
So the Maintain app solves a very distinct problem for two different groups of people. So for the construction industry, we're solving the problem of streamlining property maintenance services and the amount of admin and general communication that's involved in property maintenance. And then for the property owner, we're giving them a nice platform that they can just manage their tasks really easily. They can take a quick photo of whatever they need to be fixed or cleaned, and that generates the job list for the person doing the maintenance. So at its essence, it's a task management platform, but it really incorporates the way that the communications facilitated, calendar, and it builds a relationship, which is one of the most important things from my point of view.
Yeah, and you've been in the industry for quite some time, haven't you now?
I have, yeah. I spent 20 years nearly in construction in London. So I was building really high end basement for for billionaires in central London, and that kind of really gave me the insights into understanding that building the relationships over time with people is so important, because especially in the sort of commercial sense and the high end domestic market, there's a lot of stuff that he's doing, but the people that need it doing are generally quite time poor. So it's trying to find that, really give them that convenience is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see it in so many ways of that communication and relationships being at the forefront, or maybe I should even say the core of what we do in our day-to-day lives in business, whether that's personally or in business, but we're able to have those meaningful relationships and those meaningful conversations to achieve something ultimately that we're both trying to win on. And if one person thinks they should be doing this and the other thinks they should be doing that, that's where relationships falls down. And I imagine that's probably like the biggest fall down in communication in construction of, I wanted the wall there, versus there, and maybe on a bigger scale, but also from a small scale of like, this is my expectation and this is what I would like my ongoing maintenance to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that traditionally when a project is completed, there's a period that relationships can break down between the construction company or the person that's done the project and the client, because there's a level of expectation that the property will obviously be maintained, and if it's not maintained to the right level, then it can quite quickly sort of deteriorate. So by not only handing the keys over to a new property or building a new building, to then carry on maintaining that afterwards, it shows that you've got the sort of, I guess, the you're standing by your work. So what you're doing is you're actually committing to not only just walking away once the job's done, but you're then there for the long term to keep it as nice as possible.
Mm-hmm. And something that really stood out for me on your launch, and again, the aim for today's conversation is to get us into the networking and relationship building, which is a great segue. But something you mentioned in terms of the asset is that when we're looking at the property management perspective, is that whoever owns that asset, it's one of the biggest, most expensive assets that most people will ever own. And there's not as much emphasis on the maintenance of that asset. But if we look at our cars, we check them in for a service. They go and, we have to get that registration done. We go and wash them so we don't look scruffy when we rock up to meetings. And, we've got all of these things that we do. And often we are replacing vehicles more frequently than we are our property assets. And so I've never looked at it from that perspective of it being the most expensive asset. And then how do we then maintain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you've absolutely nailed it there with the fact that once you've bought a property, if you maintain it, it will last a lot longer. It's a nicer place for you to live and for you to work. And it's easy with a car because you can take it to someone to get it cleaned and you know that service is available when you need it. But with maintenance, unless you've got a good person that can be reliable, it's very difficult to get that level of service. So the way that we've achieved that is by bringing on a subscription model. So what people can do is they can actually commit to a set amount of time per month, and therefore that you've got a tradie or a building company on retainer effectively. So when you need something doing, they've just got a really easy way that they can do it. So rather than trying to find an individual person to do an individual task, and then every time you need something else doing, you might find someone else, and you never build that sort of longer term relationship. We've found a way that you can really nurture that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's incredible. And so as you mentioned, we met only a few months ago, for the first time, and this was in motion, this was being built, the idea was there, and then it seemed like almost overnight you are in a room filled with some of the most influential people in Western Australia, and you're surrounded by all of these incredible people that are championing you and supporting you, and I think it's an incredible thing to have achieved. But I'm intrigued, how did you get started on that? What was your journey? What was your goal, I guess, really initially, to get all these people in the room? And let's have a dive into a little bit of that journey.
Well, I think it comes down to a little bit of perseverance, and a big chunk of luck, really. So I quite quickly met a few people that connected me really well with other people in their networks, and I find that, especially in Perth, that there's a really friendly community of people, especially in the startup scene. So one thing that I did quite early on was, I think I found it on Meetup, and it was the morning startup is hosted by a couple of guys, Scott and Dave, and it's in the city. And what that kind of gave me was a really good insight into, firstly, the who's who of Perth's startup scene, but also it was nice just to have a little bit of something in common with a few people straight away. Even if you're in different industries, if you're starting something or you've got an idea and you wanna explore it, it's equally exciting and terrifying at the same time. So it's nice to sort of share those experiences. And then from there, I think LinkedIn has been amazing. There's that sort of, it's a way that you can find very targeted individuals within organisations, and just reach out and ask them if they're available to go for a coffee. And when you go out for a coffee, there's no big hard sale. I've not tried to tried to sort of sell too much to people. I've just been asking for advice on what Perth is like and who really to connect with next. And I've just found I've been past some great connections like that.
And what you're saying there is that you're going in with a view to build a connection, and then you're reaching people with more connections, and then it evolves from there. And I think the more people you connect with that are connectors, and and I would say a lot of the people that you and I both know, we're all within that connection. I would say,
Yeah,
view of the world is that if I can connect you with somebody else, then your connection will grow, but also will mine. And so if we can have a big impact on the industry, or or the area, or the people that we are dealing with, sometimes you'll be able to support them and sometimes they'll be able to support you. And I love that you're not going in there with that pitch view of like, I need to have this meeting and I need to get something at the end of it, because that's then when people really start to see that you're just out there for yourself trying to get something. And although you want to make it worth your while, that will come into fruition as you go through the process.
absolutely. I've definitely I've seen a lot of the networking that I've done as just meeting cool, interesting people. There's been some really amazing connections that I've made, and some friends that are now going to be friends for a long time that have actually got nothing to do with the construction industry. They might be on their own path doing something that's completely different in the medical industry, for example. And what I actually find value is being able to just bounce ideas off each other, and hopefully I can give more, or certainly as much as they're giving me in terms of advice and support. So it's yeah, it's nice to. I've seen it as a way of just sort of finding a little tribe of people in Perth. Being
Mm.
new here, it's been a nice way of getting out of the house, really.
Yeah, especially when you've been deep at it in your laptop, getting things done, and you're
Yeah,
able to then really branch out. So you said that you've had meetings, you've gone through LinkedIn. Talk to me a little bit about LinkedIn. How have you used that platform to grow your network?
I think the most powerful thing with LinkedIn is firstly subscribing to it, or paying for it makes a big difference. I think it's very limited if you're trying to keep under the threshold of, I can't remember what it is, 5 connections a month or whatever you get for free. It becomes a much more powerful tool when you can actually use it as much as you need to. And I've found that what when I've read a book, for example, what I've actually done is then connected with the person that wrote that book. So I've been reading a lot in the last few months, and most books that I've read, I've then tried to find the person that's written it, and I've thanked them for writing it, and then I've asked them a few questions about it and then it's actually started a few conversations. A lot of them are in the US, or a lot of them are around the world, and that's no longer a limitation. So that has been a really cool sort of way of getting a bit more information around subjects that I'm interested in.
Yeah, and that's it's I don't know whether it's the English in us, John, or the the drive to really build these
Could be.
connections. But I do a very similar process to you. If if I've read something, if I've found somebody on a
Mm.
podcast, if I've engaged with them in some way, maybe just online, I will always reach out to them, share with them what it is that I've learned, or what's been great, and then look to connect and really, I guess, really dive into more. But I think so many people are afraid of doing that because, well, they're an author. What would they want to know? What would they want to do
Yeah,
connecting with me? But ultimately, authors are, especially the books that I think I'm going to ask you that in a moment. But when we think about the books that you're reading and the books that I'm referring to, the author is not their job title. Like that's not their
no,
first thing. They became an author because they had so much to share and they had so much knowledge and skill within that industry, and they were like, I need to put this pen to paper and get it out there. And so for them, they have multiple functions and multiple people that they can be connected with, and they want to know what you think of them or what you thought about that book and how you have taken that, because that's going to help them sell more of it or create more content that will help more people just like you. And so you've really gone out there beyond what it is that I would say most people would be, open to doing or not fearing to do. And so does that come naturally to you, or is it just something that you know works?
I think it comes naturally, to be honest. I think I'm naturally quite a curious person, so I like to maybe ask a few more questions than some other people. But yeah, and also I don't know. It's just I'm always grateful if I've received something that's useful, and if someone's taken the time to write a book and I've benefited from it, then there's no harm in a quick message to say thanks for that. And that, I don't know, they probably get a lot of those, but I've had a few people come back and said, no, it's really nice, and we've ended up having a bit of a conversation, and if they're ever in this neck of the woods, hopefully they'll reach out and we'll have a coffee or something, which would be really cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. And the curiosity bit, it's so important in sales and in building relationships and building connections, because curiosity allows us to go deeper than just what are we in that meeting to do? What are we on that conversation to have? And it goes beyond our job, your job, and how I can sell to you and how I can buy from you, if that is the scenario. And when we get curious, we go so much deeper. And that, to me, then is probably the nugget to what's really got you connected with so many people so quickly, is that you're able to find interest and find other ways to connect and engage. And the golden nugget for me is that opportunity between something that empowers you or entices you or is able to give you a bit more insight, and vice versa. And so the curiosity thing is so important in sales, but I think you're doing it without thinking about curiosity is important in sales. You're just curious, and that's allowed you to connect on so many levels.
Yeah, absolutely. Curious, nosy sometimes, I guess. Yeah, and I'm always sort of trying to find that spark or that thing that's differentiated people from. So obviously, a lot of people that have created big businesses or organisations or charities, they've always got that little something that they've done that's different to other people, and it's always interesting to see if they did it consciously, or to see if they've actually something that they realised after the event, and it was just upon reflection that they've actually been able to appreciate the power of a certain thing that they've done. So it's quite nice because even a couple of scenarios where I've spoke to people after the event and they've sort of said, "Oh, I wish we'd actually had this insight when we'd written the book, because it would have ended up in the book." So it's everything's a learning curve.
It certainly is. And if we, in my world, we win or we learn. And even when we win, we still learn, but we're always learning, and we're always, learning and growing from other people. And I think the moment that we stop learning, that would be so boring. If we just all of a sudden were like, no, we're done. That's it. I know everything I can possibly know. And I just don't think, if you look at some of the most successful people in the world, they never get to that point.
Oh, and I think, I've never been very academic. So if I guess growing up, if you was to say, right, you need to learn this, it would actually probably put a roadblock in front of me. And there was actually, there's so many different ways of learning, but now I absolutely love learning from people's experiences. And I think there's just so much to be learned, so much to be gained from that. So.
Yeah, certainly. I totally agree with that. And so you've gone to market, and
Yes.
across WA you've built this network, and you're growing this now outside of WA, and because this app is definitely bigger than just WA. And I think more people in the world need to get their hands on it. So for you, obviously you've built this network, and this will, certainly leverage, and there's a lot of people you're connected with that can take you beyond this little state. But from the people that came and the people that you were able to engage with, you talked about some of the avenues that you've gone down to get those. What do you think would have been the case if you hadn't have leveraged that and just left it to invites only and faceless advertising, communication, etc.? What do you think would have been the impact to that launch day?
I think it would have. You would have had maybe a few people, but nowhere near the sort of the caliber of people that turned up. I didn't ask people to come because they were necessarily going to be customers or they were necessarily going to be clients. First and foremost, I wanted it to be a bit more of a celebration and a way that I could say thank you to people that had helped me, and whether that was helped me by passing me on a contact or helped me by just sitting down and working through a scenario with me, or it's just it felt like a nice way of actually drawing sort of a line under the development stage, and then it gave me a deadline to then move into the next stage of the project and the company.
Yeah.
And it was and that's why I sort of set it up like a networking event. I wanted people to have conversations in the room that I wasn't facilitating, and by having people there, I know that there's a few people there that have gone on to working with other people that they met at that event, and that to me is so powerful, because that's what I've effectively done at every other networking event I've been to, and to know that that's happened at mine, that's really good.
Yeah, amazing. And it's that serving, isn't it? Not going in there with a sell or with an end goal in mind, but knowing that you can build a network, and that with a network, that opportunities will come, and new people and new connections will be made, which I think is really, really beautiful to see. And you've said about being thankful and grateful a number of times throughout our conversation. And I saw that in your launch event when I was there, about how grateful you were. And I actually spoke to your mum at the event, and she was she was so proud, and she was talking about all the things that you've done, and everybody had that same viewpoint. And I think that your authenticity comes through regardless of whoever's listening to this and whoever wants to apply these rules, but the authenticity will show through, and what you are about and how you're going to go about achieving great things show through. So it's quite easy to see whether you are truthful or real, or going about it for the right reasons, or just trying to get a quick buck, or trying to leverage a network without really building a relationship.
Yeah, it's that. I think one thing that's certainly important to me is credibility. I don't want anyone to feel like that I'm using them ever. It's certainly something that I always try to sort of give more than I take in that respect. But I feel there's a massive. I'm not sure if I could have done this if I was still in London, because I feel that there's maybe a different level of expectation from people in London. That everyone, certainly my experience is, there's a layer of people are expecting you to ask them for something, or they're just not really as welcoming, or as so I think if it was the other way around and I was going from Perth to London, I think it would have been a much more difficult transition. But the sort of the friendliness and the networks here have just been really open. I could be completely wrong in saying that, because I've never tried to start a company from scratch in London in the startup community. So there might be a really amazing startup community in London, but I was always on the coalface in the construction industry, and famously not the most friendly of industries.
You're gonna have all the Londoners after you now.
I know. Yeah.
They're gonna be like, we are friendly. What are you talking about?
I've got a lot of friends in London.
Yeah. We'll make sure they listen to this and give us a like.
Yeah, well,
And,
absolutely.
I mean, I'm northern, so you're southern, I'm northern, and we are renowned to be friendlier than you. Just
Yeah,
as a
100%.
given, we are
Yeah,
friendlier.
yeah, yeah.
And I think, in the UK as a whole, I mean, the sales position is very different. If we look at WA, it's probably one of the friendliest startup markets to go into.
Yeah.
However, I would say that in Sydney is also as friendly and as accessible. But I think there's a lot more people in London than there are in WA or, Australia versus the UK.
Yeah,
There's a lot more, there are a lot more people, which becomes, there's pros and cons to that because you've got more market, you've got more, more market share, more people to go after. But to build a small knit community, it's definitely different. And I sold for 10 years in the UK and I loved it. And I thought it was a great place to be in. And everybody was very open to learning and being familiar with new things. And because it wasn't so close knit, I felt like there was more opportunity. Whereas coming to Australia, I came with no connections, with nobody that I knew, and I had to build that. And I used LinkedIn and coffees and introductions
yeah,
and just trying to find my way around the network, around the market and build my network. But I think going back now, I deal with a lot in the UK, is that there's different avenues and there's different opportunities. But I think that goes for any country, anywhere, of what's going to get them to work and what isn't. And the thing I always find very interesting with our outreach approach is that we have to be really mindful of what personality or personas that we are selling to in other countries or even states. And we do a lot over in the US, and there's on the eastern states, but east coast versus the west coast, very different to how
yeah,
we
right.
engage and how direct we are versus let's chat and let's have a coffee and let's get to know each other versus do you want this because we can achieve this for you. And we have to be really mindful of where that is. And I think your approach with that building community and serving works in so many areas, but you would probably just have to change that slightly to go to market in a different country. Or even in a different state. If we look at London versus Manchester in terms of counties,
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily saying this is so black and white, but London, people wanting you to get to the point. So being quite direct and
People,
short
yeah,
will probably suit you better to them being like, hey, could we have a chat? They're like, what about? Get to the point. Tell me what you actually want to talk about and I'll have the conversation with you. But I want to know what it is first. So, again, we can still certainly find those networks, but it's just about where we can start. And I do agree there is a very friendly community here in startups, because I think a lot of people, what was it? Somebody said to me about, that you're in Perth if you have a full-time job and you also have a side hustle. And I thought that was
yeah,
really interesting. And I reckon that's Australia as a whole is very much like I have a job, but I also have built this other empire on the side. And I
yeah.
think that I wonder whether that is just the change of the times with, globally, not just necessarily across Australia.
I do feel that there's a definite feeling of anything's possible here.
Mm.
With that sort of when you see the scale of the different industries that are here, you think, wow, that's there's certain things here that you don't even consider. Like I heard a stat the other day that there's more autonomous vehicles here in WA than there is anywhere else in the world, for example. And there's whole industries that you would never even consider to be that important. And it's kind of it's opened my eyes to the diversity that's here. I think obviously London's
Mm.
very financial. It's very there's a lot of construction and there's a lot of old, like very old institutions in London. Where here there's a lot of people that still feel that they can try new stuff. And again, there's probably that when you scratch the surface in London as well. But yeah, I've just really enjoyed learning about it here.
Mm. And I guess, well, you've had the additional bonus of not really knowing too many people here, and so you've
Oh
had to genuinely go out there and find new connections and not be
yeah,
like, oh, Dave, I know we spoke a few months ago, I know this job for
yeah,
you. You're having to go back through your old book, whereas here it's like it's brand new. Whether you've heard of me, not heard of me, heard of the app, not heard of the app, startup community
yeah.
or not, we're able to get in there and really get going. And so one of the biggest, I guess, really pushbacks on building a network that I get from a lot of my clients now. I deal with more so enterprise businesses. I'm dealing with their sales teams, but a lot of the time, the pushback is it's time consuming. It's really, it's taking time to build that network. What would you say to somebody that would say it's time consuming and haven't got time to do it?
I would say that you could spend half an hour a day, and that compounds, and the amount that you can actually do with that is really it's consistency, like it is with most things, but it's taking that time. If you can kill two birds with one stone, and you're in the city already, and then you know that someone else might be working in the city that day, so you say, let's grab a quick coffee. Um, it's quite nice. They don't feel like you're going to take up 3 hours of their time, and the amount of engagement you can have over the space of one coffee is amazing. You don't have to put big emphasis on having an hour long meeting with someone. You can just have a series of small meetings, or just make an introduction, and then carry the conversation on LinkedIn, for example. But you get a lot more engagement once you've actually met someone in person. I feel personally, anyway.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, I teach a lot of people how to do LinkedIn in about 10 minutes a day once they're set up, because it doesn't need to take that long. And I think if we look at how long we often spend hours on our Instagram scrolling, looking at, for me,
Yeah,
dog videos,
yeah,
that
yeah,
is
yeah.
definitely where the whole can be. And if we stop on there and we really prioritize what it is that we're going after, building a network and spending between 10 and 30 minutes on doing that is extremely worthwhile.
Well, I found myself, like everyone does, scrolling social media a little bit. So I actually found that I was making it just work for me by using LinkedIn as my social media platform of choice.
Yeah.
And rather than I'm guilty for the dog videos as much as the next person, but I was more sort of just, if someone, I'd actually read a lot of articles that people were writing. Um,
Mm.
Quite often I'd scroll past a lot of stuff, and then you see obviously the headlines, but when you actually see some of the stuff, when you read the 2 minute estimation for the actual the article, um, there's actually some real nuggets in information that I've found just by taking that extra little bit of time. So yeah, I'm still scrolling social media, but it's just LinkedIn now most of the time. I've grown up a little bit, maybe.
You've grown up in the last 9 months there, John.
Yeah.
You've moved over to the adult platform.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Not that adult.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's been such a great opportunity to chat to you. Thank you so much for giving us
Thank
your
you.
time.
Yeah, and thank you for coming to the launch as well. It was great to have your support.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It was very impressive, and I look forward to seeing more about what you're sharing from that event, and also what we're going to see on the app. And so for anybody that's listening, if you are in that industry, if you want to just reach out to John and do what he's done with everybody else, and grow your network, I'll make sure that his link to his LinkedIn profile is in the show notes, so you can do just that. So thank you for being here, John. Thank you for letting me in your ears again, and we'll be back next week with another episode from the Sell Like You podcast.